So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our panel, and thank you to our amazing panelists for coming and spending some of your Sunday afternoon with us. We're really excited to have you all and hear from our amazing speakers.
Before we continue, please make sure that you fill out the attendance form with the QR code on the slide so that we can have an accurate representation of all of our participants.
Okay, so a quick overview of what we'll be doing. We will start out with a quick introduction to our organization, MoCo, as well as our panelists, then move on to the panel portion of the event. Following this, we will have a short break from our room session and then conclude our event by 5 p.m.
Okay, first a quick introduction to us and to our panelists. MoCo is a student-led organization, and we focus on environmental advocacy issues and education. Our department specifically works on educating the community on environmental issues through various events.
So this is just like a quick rundown of our agenda, and I'm going to put the link to the slideshow in the chat so you can access it moving forward.
Yeah, and here's the schedule and also a few ideas to keep in mind for the panel and breakout room. So first, we're just going to go around to our panelists and ask you all to introduce yourselves to our participants. So can we start with Adriana? Could you just give us a quick rundown of who you are?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. Looking forward to our discussion. My name is Adriana Hochberg. I work in Montgomery County government. I've been there for about 3.5 years. I serve as the county's climate change officer, as well as for the last year, I've been also working as the acting director in our county's Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Next, we will have Dr. Kasiak.
Hi, I'm Paul Kazak, and I guess what I do these days mostly is teach at Johns Hopkins University grad students, environmental science kinds of things, and leadership. And I've a long background working with high school youth in particular, but college youth as well.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kazak. Next, we would like to introduce Sarah Solinsky, an environmental education advocate. Sarah, could you please give us some more information about yourself?
I'm not sure if Sarah joined today. Madison?
Yeah, I do not think Sarah Solinsky is here, so we can just move on to our next panelist.
Okay.
Okay, next we have Lynn Harris, a Board of Education at-large member.
Hi, everyone. Lynn Harris. Very happy to be here today. As mentioned, I currently sit on the Montgomery County Board of Education. I've been in that role since December of 2020. And one of my big priorities when I came onto the board was to see how I could help support and push forward our work to become a more sustainable and much more climate resilient school system and work with student advocates across the county on those goals.
Thank you, Lynn. Next, we would like to introduce Seth Adams, the Director of the Department of Facilities Management for MCPS. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Seth Adams. I'm the Director of Department of Facilities Management. Been with MCPS for about 15 years now in a variety of different roles. Currently, you know, the role that I have within the school system is everything from maintenance and operations to new construction, new builds. But more importantly, the creation of a new division 2 years ago, the Sustainability and Compliance Division. And that is where a lot of our work, as you heard from Ms. Harris, where we've been focusing on changing everything from operations to behavioral elements within the school district. So looking forward to talking with you all and looking for ways to really move the needle and have you be a big part of the work that we do as a school district.
Great, thank you, Seth. That was a great introduction, and thank you to all our panelists. Next, we're going to be moving on to the panel section, which will be the majority of this event. For our panelists here, we'd like to make sure that the order in which you answer questions will just be Adriana, Dr. Kazak, then Lynn, and then Seth. So the way we introduce you guys. And here are the questions we'll be asking. So first of all, starting with Adriana, what does your day-to-day life look like, and what influenced you to choose the career you have right now?
So my day-to-day is a lot of meetings. I have both internal meetings and external meetings. Internal meeting with colleagues, either within the Department of Environmental Protection or with other county staff, as well as external one with community experts, volunteers, other outside groups. I also frequently have council briefings and sessions on proposed bills or proclamations. In fact, I have 2 of those meetings coming up next week. And from time to time, I'll as well have a number of events that could be press events, community events. And I always try to squeeze in some learning time or, research and development time, during the week, trying to read up on, the latest news in this field, because climate change is ever evolving in terms of a field, as well as various webinars. And so that is a great benefit in terms of, assessing experts on this field, literally from all around the world. And there's a lot of free resources available to keep learning. See, the second part of your questions was what influenced me to choose this career. As a child, growing up in Brazil, I saw kind of the dysfunction of living in a large city, and I felt like the local government and national government was failing its residents. And so I, from a young age, I thought, oh, I want to be the mayor. I really think that government has the potential to solve all of these societal problems. And then a little bit later on, when I was in, I think, college age, I thought, well, I want to be a diplomat. I really want to work kind of at the world stage on international fairs, international issues. And I feel like working on climate change issues at the local level really kind of brings together kind of those 2 aspirations that I had in terms of mayor plus diplomat, because, obviously climate change is a global issue, but there's a lot that we can do at the local level to make an impact. So that's what makes the work interesting for me.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to hear more about Brazil, especially. And then next, Dr. Kazak.
You can just call me Paul, please.
Oh, okay.
All right. Day-to-day life. So I have to go back a little bit. Most of my career I spent with Maryland Department of Natural Resources. I was a fish guy. So I did a fair amount of field work and a fair amount of office work, probably a good balance. And I had a lot of kind of control over what I did. But I was very frustrated because I saw that we were documenting the decline of the environment kind of in a world-class way, but we weren't, in my mind, doing enough to change the trajectory. So 6 years ago, I retired to concentrate on doing leadership training mostly. I also teach a sustainability course. So those are near and dear to me. And that why I got into the environmental field was I had spent 6 years in the Navy on submarines. I was a teenage nuke, if you will, and I wanted to run from that, and I went to my first love, which was nature.
Great, thank you. And then Lynn?
So my day-to-day life it's different all the time because of the continual arc of the work of the Board of Education, regular meetings, committee meetings, things like that, and then issues that are continuously popping up. And then also I work with advocates and allies all across the system on a wide array of issues impacting the community and impacting the system, because I really do think our school system is a microcosm of our community. And so no one day looks like another. I spend a lot of time out in schools, just getting to a better sense of how things are actually going, because I don't know what I don't know. So the more people that I talk to, the more people that I can learn from, the better. If it comes to if my role is in part to make decisions about the school system, but even more overarching than that is to hold the school system accountable to the work that we say we're doing and the priorities that we say that we have. And what influenced me to choose, I don't know that I would say being on the board is a career. It's more of a destination. Because I've had careers in nursing, in law. I was a lawyer for 15 years and I did a lot of environmental work. I went back to school and got my graduate degree in public health from Hopkins. And I've done work on disease prevention and control. I've done work politically with various candidates and issues. And then finally, I taught for 5 years in MCPS. I taught medical science at Edison. And but as important as my professional work, I was very a longtime advocate in the county. And I did a lot of work through the Montgomery County Council of PTAs. And I served 8 years on their board of directors and 7 years on their executive committee, including 3 years as vice president of advocacy, 3 years as president. And through that work, I got to know the school system and its communities extraordinarily well. And when an open seat on the board came up, especially at the time that it did, when we were seeing sort of the ugliest underbelly of our county, you know, felt entitled to speak to issues that were not in the best interest of creating a truly diverse and inclusive school system. So when we did a boundary analysis back in 2019, we heard a lot of things that I think surprised some people. And when at the end of 2019, our sitting board member announced they were not going to run for re-election and that seat was open, I decided I was as qualified as anybody to run, and I was as knowledgeable, more knowledgeable about our school system than most, and that I had a vision for a system that truly valued student and community voice in the work. And so I ran, and I think largely because I had a very strong student field team and student ground game, I won.
Okay, great. And then Seth.
Well, it's going to be tough to follow Lynn all day, but I'll give it a shot here. But no, similar to Adriana, my role is everything from dealing with emergencies. If power goes out at one of your schools, we're the first to get involved. The air conditioning's out. Obviously, we are one of the largest developers in the county when you think about it from a perspective of construction. So the work that we do in rebuilding schools is absolutely a full-time job to manage that. But a big part of really what we also do is our planning work. And the capital planning is part of the purview of the facilities office as well. So really forecasting where we need to be in terms of focusing on critical funding issues, whether that be capacity issues, building space seats for students, whether it be forecasting where programmatic changes may take our school district and how to prepare for that. And obviously, as I mentioned to you all, creating a sustainability division, really taking the work of everything we do and having sustainability be the number one influencer, and really start to change the processes in a way that's truly going to make a difference. So it's unfortunately there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of emergency work, but we do, as you heard from others, you do have to make the time to plan. And if you don't plan, obviously you end up in situations where I think as a world we are right now, and trying to chase things that we should have been well prepared for. In terms of what influenced me to choose this career, so my background is a mechanical engineer. I've worked in a variety of different areas. I worked in manufacturing, constructing, building manufacturing lines. I've worked in the private industry, but in the private side, one of the projects that I truly fell in love with was building a school. And so, with an opportunity to work for a school district and just build schools, I felt this was a really great opportunity. And obviously being here 15 years, it's stuck for a while, and it's one that I still obviously love to come to work every day. One of the things I think is really important for this group is that, you know, some of your career choices that you make, obviously you start with the foundation, but you will make it to a point where you become frustrated with things not changing or you know, things not moving fast enough. I think you heard it from Ms. Harris a little bit. And that's where you look for career opportunities where you can make a difference. And for me, this is a position where I can hopefully influence with my background as a mechanical engineer with a master's in environment and sustainability to really move the needle of a school district and be a part of the big county initiatives that Adriana and her team are putting together. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you all so much for those responses. It was very informative to learn about your daily activities and why you got involved with environmental sustainability and advocacy. So our next question, starting off again with Adriana, which environmental issues do you feel the most strongly about and why?
The first one is, and I probably already gave away the answer in my last response, but climate change. Because it is an existential threat that is, you know, already manifesting itself. And if we don't very quickly on a global scale move to, you know, eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, it really has very dire impacts for kind of the future of modern civilization. And I'm not trying to be grandiose or make an overstatement here, but this is actually the truth. And then the other one that is also tied with climate change is the issue of loss of species biodiversity. We are currently experiencing globally a mass extinction event in many plants. I'm sorry, I think there's some background noise. I do think that the issue of biodiversity and mass extinctions is another very, very critical issue facing humanity right now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree. So next up, we have Paul, please.
All right. Yeah, climate change be number one, but very close behind would be biodiversity loss, and not just for things like ecosystem services and all that, but for what it takes away from us, the loneliness of humanity when we get rid of so many species. And then, you know, right behind that is all of these environmental issues affect humanity deeply. And the people that are affected first and foremost are the folks that don't have, the folks that live in poverty all over the world. And that just breaks my heart. So it's, you know, it's all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So next up we have Lynn.
Hard to come up with one, but I would say, you know, we are in a time of true climate crisis. And just building on what Adriana and Paul said, sometimes I look at the planet the way I look at a human being, because I spent so many years in medicine. And in so many ways, it's a closed loop and everything is connected to everything else. One thing fails, one thing goes off the rails, one species is eliminated, and it's just an unending series of dominoes falling. And so, you know, it's like we have to look at the big picture on creating truly resilient communities that look through the lens of sustainability with every decision that we make. But also, how do we convince people? And one of the things I learned, you know, when I was at Hopkins was the importance of, if you want people to change their behavior, if you want people to change the way they impact the world around them with their own personal choices, the first thing you have to do is make the change that needs to happen seem something that they are empowered to do. And if somebody feels empowered to change, they are far more likely to do it. And so one of the other areas of passion for me is this kind of thing right here, where we empower people to see every single thing they can do in their day-to-day lives that make a difference, that there's no action that you take that does not matter. Whether it's convincing your school system, this is a new one, Seth, you may not have heard before, to move away from traditional paper products to hemp paper products, or, you know, getting people to take part in the county's pilot food, you know, curbside food waste recycling. It all matters. And so, you know, kind of the big picture, small picture.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely agree with the sort of domino effect comparison to environmental issues. Okay, so next we have Seth.
And I think obviously I agree with everything everyone said. Obviously with climate change being the top. Obviously one of my passions though is the influences that the built environment has on environment. So you know, again, it focuses on indoor air quality, renewable energies, you know, just energy production as a whole. But really just that those impacts that the built environment have, everything from land use to deforestation to biodiversity loss, and the influences that that obviously some different decisions can make to either improve or create other issues. So that's really where my focus is, or my passion have been, is obviously just the understanding how all these pieces come together, but the areas obviously that I'm most familiar with and responsible for are from the built environment perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think those are amazing points, things that we can focus on here ourselves in environmental education. So the next question is, what are some initiatives you have been a part of in attempts to foster change against climate change and similar issues?
So when I arrived at the county in 2019, the Montgomery County had very ambitious climate goals, but no roadmap for getting there. At the end of 2017, the county council had issued a climate emergency resolution and upped our goals to achieve 80% reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2027 from a baseline year of 2005, and to fully eliminate greenhouse gas emissions use in Montgomery County by 2035, or a goal of 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. So when I joined the county, I led the development of the county's community-wide climate action plan, which was finalized and released last year. We're now in the second year of implementing the plan. Something that was really important in developing the plan, and something that the county executive felt very strongly about, was the importance of including the community in developing the plan. This wasn't kind of an off-the-shelf consultant product. The recommendations, in the final actions that are included in the climate action plan really came from the community. We put out a call for volunteers, and we ended up with about 200 members of the community participating on 6 working groups. They met over a period of 7 to 8 months, and altogether they came up with close to 900 recommendations for the county to implement. And so then at the second stage, we brought in a consultant team to help us parse through those recommendations and help us prioritize the actions in terms of, what are the most impactful actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The climate action plan also addresses climate resiliency, given that, climate change is already here. How do we adapt the county to, more intense summer heat, as well as more extreme storm events, flooding, for example. And in addition, something that was very important in the development of the climate action plan was to center racial equity and social justice. So we made inroads in terms of every one of the 86 actions in the climate action plan includes what is called equity enhancing measures. We identified specific measures that needed to be taken to make sure that as we're in the process of implementing that specific climate action, we are doing so in a way that enhances racial equity and avoids exacerbating racial inequities. And we're now in the beginning of the second year of implementing the climate action plan. Montgomery County government is taking a whole of government approach to it. So we have many, it's not just the Department of Environmental Protection issue, it's all departments, and MCPS is a great partner. And we have, out of the 86 actions in the climate action plan, 77 are underway this year. We issue an annual work plan that outlines, the actions that we plan to make progress on in the coming year with our existing resources and staff. And we also just issued our annual report that outlined all the highlights and the progress that we made during the first year of implementing the climate action plan. And in a moment, I'll include a link in the chat to our climate newly refreshed the county's climate website that includes links to the climate action plan as well as to our work plan and lots of other resources.
Thank you so much for sharing, and definitely be sure to check out the climate action plan information. So next, Dr. Kazak, or Paul, sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. So I would start with what I do at home and then try to spread with neighbors, things like solar panels on the roof, electric cars, mowing with not a gas mower, composting. So actively an advocate for all that stuff. Don't keep it to myself. The scout group that I was involved with started a tree nursery, and in over the course of say 15 years planted on the order of 40,000 large trees as a sequestration kind of thing. They also did a whole bunch of other activities, some of which I may have suggested to them. Low carbon diet, David Gerson's thing. Let's see, I'll just stop there. Just lots of different things that they did from annual events about sustainability and just trying to get the word out education wise. I helped Frostburg State University with their climate action plan, so that was fairly early on, and the university president was one of the first to sign the college's commitment kind of thing. Also out in Frostburg area, which is in Western Maryland. If you're not familiar, we started a thing called Frostburg Grows, and the intent was to have sustainable agriculture using high tunnels and greenhouses. And we did that on strip mine land and used lots of recycled materials. Like when next time you drive on the highway, look on the other side of the road when you see a highway sign, and you'll see that they're made into panels. We use those panels for literally everything. It was kind of fun. What else have I done? Lots of events with 350.org, which is Bill McKibben's original group. And then more recently, Third Act is something he started for folks over 50. I was on the training team for a while for that. Al Gore's Climate Reality, and you can get trained to do that. And that's kind of an advocacy kind of thing. Does a little bit more than just that, but advocacy is the primary thing. And I started mentoring climate reality trainees as well. But other than that, I've done political advocacy, like going down to Annapolis and talking to legislators during the session about things like climate bills and all that. I have exercised my right to protest a few times, so that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And then my teaching at Johns Hopkins University, I would say I've become more and more try to infuse in the classes the need to take action and step up and exercise leadership. So yeah, that's probably enough for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I definitely appreciated the points about policy and all that. So next, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Sure. I think some of the initiatives, I think for me, I grew up in rural Kansas, surrounded by farms, and, saw very early on the impact of first the boarding in, at my age, I'm old enough to remember before we had the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and the National Environmental Policy Act and all those pieces of groundbreaking federal legislation that came out of the Congress back in the early 70s. And so I think I was aware, because of where I lived, of the impact of the natural world and man's not necessarily always stewardship of it, and why that mattered. And so, in things that I've been doing lifelong, I mean, when I went to, I chose the law school I chose because they claimed to have a strong environmental law program. When I got there, I found that was a bunch of, that was not true. And so joined up with a bunch of similarly disillusioned students at my law school. And we, in a pretty short space of time, developed an environmental law society that was the most active student organization in the law school. By the time we graduated in 3 years later, we had grown the environmental law offerings and the environmental law faculty from basically one teacher and a course and a half to 4 faculty and multiple courses, and also a partnership with the Graduate School of Engineering, and which law students and engineering students could take courses at one another's schools on around environmental law and environmental issues. But, you know, even more recently, you know, I got to give credit where it's due. I think one of the things that I do right now is try to connect student advocates, student climate activists and sustainability advocates with other people around them that can help them move their work forward. And when I came onto the board in December of 2020, they immediately made me chair of the Fiscal Management Committee. Not a role I asked for, not a role that I thought I was particularly interested in, but I've come to love that committee as a way to move the needle on issues. Because one of the things that I wanted to see us doing as we looked at fiscal management, part of fiscal management is how do we reduce our carbon footprint? And how do we do well and do good at the same time? And so, you know, reached out to Mr. Adams and said, I know you care about this. I know you have a vision, you have an enormous vision. How can I help you? Not me doing that work, but how can I give you, you know, how can I plow the road for the work that you want this system to do, that you know we can do with the right motivation and with the right perspective. And so, you know, I didn't have to do more than ask, and, you know, kind of Seth was all over it. And then I reached out to my late colleague, Pat O'Neill, who at the time was chair of the board's policy management committee, and said, you know, this is what I want to do. You know, I'm using the fiscal management committee to elevate sustainability issues onto the agenda of every meeting, you know, emphasizing the important areas of work that are already being done and the vision for scale up and expansion. How can we take this further faster? And she said, let's revise the only, you know, environmental related policy that we have, which was at that point almost 50-year-old policy called what was it called? Energy conservation policy. And so working with Seth and his team, you know, we revised that thing soup to nuts, put it up for public comment, got the students engaged, you know, and, you know, in the world of policymaking, rocket fast time, you know, completely revised that policy and renamed it. It's now called the sustainability policy, which actually tells you a little bit more about what it actually is. And that, I think, I just think that is potentially groundbreaking and is truly going to be transformative for the school system, which, as Seth has said, you know, we're the largest property manager, we're the largest developer in the county. So what the school system does has huge impacts in this county.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. And I think, like Paul, I enjoyed hearing about how like various like facets of advocacy can relate to the environment and sustainability. So now to move on to Seth.
And I'll be brief here because I think, you know, Lynn did cover a lot of the work that we've been doing for the past year. But, you know, similar to Paul, I'd say, you know, really where I feel passionate about is the ability to give those with a passion of sustainable practices a voice. You know, it hasn't always been the case. And so, you know, for me in particular, it's some really fantastic individuals that work for the school system that have tremendous backgrounds, that have tremendous knowledge, and then to give them the relevance to have a platform to talk about it and to take action is just critically important. But for me, what's the most important is the ability to actually do things, right? So to participate in stream cleanups, to be a part of, you know, different composting initiatives, personally and supporting professionally. Those are the things I do feel strongly that are the most impactful.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for all you've done to contribute to our community and for speaking for us today to inspire a new generation of people to also give back. With that being said, do you believe it's more important to engage in advocacy or to take action, no matter how small, such as changes to your individual lifestyle? We can begin with Adriana.
So I think both can be impactful. When it comes to advocacy, what I would share, and this is based on my personal experience, and I know that there are opinions that are probably going to be all over the map on this, but I would encourage what I'm calling smart, targeted advocacy. Don't just be loud with a loudspeaker on the street, or throw paint onto a Van Gogh painting. I think that what's more impactful is to do the research, understand, what is the policy proposal under consideration? What is the process of decision making on a given climate action? Who are the decision makers? And then target them. And I think that, for example, it took the county council about a year to pass building energy performance standards. They did pass it this past May. It's a very important policy that will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from existing buildings in the county. But it took them a year. Did it have to take them a year? No, they could have been much, speedier about it. And there were advocates that were aware of how long it was taking them, and they contacted, the various council members and, helped them move things along. But I think that, had they heard from, 20 times more people about it, maybe they would have sped up a little bit more. So this is just an example, and I think it does take more work. It takes kind of really honing in on what the particular issue or policy is, and like understanding the key decision makers. But I think it can be much more impactful than just being loud with a loudspeaker on the street. And I say this because, I currently work in one of the Wheaton offices of the county, but I used to work in the executive office building in Rockville. And a couple of years ago, there was a group, with loudspeakers, and they were protesting outside the building about climate change. And here I am in the building trying to work on climate change, and it was very disruptive. I couldn't do my work because they were so loud. And so, I think that, that's why I personally, based on this experience, I really advocate for the more targeted advocacy approach.
I agree. Thank you for your perspective. Paul? Sorry, Paul, you're on mute.
Well, okay. Let me rephrase that, what you didn't hear. I'm sorry. I think we need both. And for me, just from my personal standpoint, I need to feel more like I've done something frequently, planting trees and all that, because I know I did something good. Advocacy and some other, initiatives, you don't know if you've, you don't know the outcome, I guess. So just from my standpoint, I like to celebrate little successes. And, I think we need to practice a way of life that's different. And so that means you need to do it individually. And you can't just stop there. Obviously, your neighbors have to be involved and all that. So you kind of have to be an ambassador for that life change and show people that you can grow your own food and it's actually kind of fun, and give it away and share. And that's a good thing. So I think if we did more of that, we would be happier. That being said, politics is politics, and it's difficult to move the system without citizen involvement. So that's critical as well. I'll say just one other thing here, that as I have come to be in the leadership field and investigate more of it, education does not produce behavior change, and so you got to do stuff to make people change their behavior. Just making them aware of things won't necessarily change at all what they do. There's lots of great social science experiments to show you that. If anybody's interested, I'm happy to share all of that. And that rocked my world. I spent 25 years in Maryland DNR collecting great information and making a huge effort to educate people. And then they didn't use the results particularly. And that's very, it's not fulfilling, let's say. I'm not there anymore, but anyway, okay.
Thank you for your research. I'd love to hear more. Next, we can hear from Lynn.
Yeah, just agreeing with Adriana and Paul. I mean, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. I mean, it's one thing to, be part of a big protest or, write a climate action plan or criticize one or whatever, if then you turn around and get in your private vehicle and drive everywhere. We all have to be part of the solution in the way that we live our lives every day. We have to demonstrate, we have to live the values that we talk about. But I would say, advocacy as a decision maker now, I know, and have known as an advocate myself for years, it does matter. Sometimes change is a marathon, not a sprint, but sometimes you hit a sweet spot and you can make things happen quickly. But the key, I think, this is just me, I think the key to successful advocacy is, one, as Adriana said, you have to know your issue very, very well, because you're going to come up against decision makers who don't. And when you can talk circles around them, especially if you know they're going to start from a place of opposition, when everything that they're going to throw at you, you can bat right back and then, do a double take and a backflip and land on your feet. That is hugely effective, because the best advocacy is both thoughtful and constructive, not just yelling and screaming about something and telling people, oh, you got to change this, oh, you got to fix this, oh, you got to do something. No, the best advocacy is to come forward and say, this is a problem, this is why I know, this is what I think would be better, and this is how I can help you fix that. So when you come at your advocacy in that way, you kind of build immediate relationship and buy-in with the people you're trying to influence. And so I think both are important. And I admire the way we have, let's be honest, we have a ton of really effective and influential advocates under the age of 18 in this county.
Thank you. That's a great point, Lynn. We can move on to Seth now.
And I'll be brief and try to be additive here. I agree with everything the panelists have said. One thing I would just say though is, as being in a role where I've had quite a bit of advocacy directed towards me, right? Not just advocating for something. It's been directed at me in many occasions. And I would say advocacy from my perspective has really changed over the past decade. We do seem to be more in a space of I'm right, you're wrong type of advocacy, and that's not helpful. It really isn't. So for me, in my experiences, there have been more opportunities over the years for folks to advocate in a way that's maybe a little different, to say, hey, I know you need help. I have expertise in this area. We feel that maybe you're not necessarily achieving some of the goals that you should be or can be. This is what we can do to help support. This is the knowledge that we can bring to the table to help. So for me, that type of advocacy is incredibly helpful, and I feel that we've had some really successful changes over the years where we've had partnerships instead of really what I would say is as Adriana put it, let's just get the bullhorns out and scream from the streets. That's in a lot of ways it almost puts up more barriers than it breaks down the hurdles here. So for any of you that I know you're all advocates, and I think that's why we're all here, is that we know that you bring an incredible amount of energy and motivation and information to the table, and we're all just looking for ways to harness that and have you be a part of the change, because we're not pushing back against it. We just need help, and I think the more and more that we can say that, and I'm pretty sure Adriana feels the same way, because there's not enough time in the day to do everything that we need to do, and the more support and help and guidance would be phenomenal to move the needle faster than what it currently is.
All right, thank you to our panelists. Those were some really interesting points on all of those topics. The next question will be, how feasible do you think creating environmental change is this year? And we're going to start with Adriana.
I think that there's a lot of good momentum. Locally, our county's operating budget has a historical amount of funding for climate initiatives. It includes 60 new climate positions that we are going to be recruiting for across 6 different county departments. It also includes over $23 million in new funding for climate initiatives, and that includes $18 million that's going to the Montgomery County Green Bank to further their work related to clean energy and energy efficiency retrofits in public and private buildings around the county. So there's a lot of momentum there. Also federally, the federal government, with the recent passage of 2 different bills, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and then most recently the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act alone has $369 billion for climate change over the next 10 years. There are going to be a lot of funding opportunities for counties, municipalities, nonprofit governments, nonprofit organizations being made available, in the coming years for this work. And so we are gearing up for an influx of new dollars to be able to accelerate our work related to implementing the climate action plan. And there's going to be a new council next year. The general election is just a few weeks away. And so we don't yet know the election results, but based on the primary election, we know that there were several primary election winners that campaign on climate platforms. And so we can expect to see lots of continued and enhanced interest among council members in the upcoming council on climate. And so that's very exciting from my perspective.
All right, thank you so much, Adriana. Next, we're going to move to Paul, if you could answer some of these questions.
There we go. All right, the first thing I thought of when I saw the question was a quote that's attributed to Confucius. The person that thinks they can and the person that thinks they can't are both right. And so it might seem very daunting, or, well, this is a bad year politically or whatever. Don't hold that view. Hold the optimist view. And if you need just one single example, think about the people in Ukraine. When Russia invaded, I thought they have maybe about 2 weeks and they're going to be overrun. Not only are they not, they are likely going to win. And they didn't get that from having a we're going to lose attitude, right? And you all know, because you're on this call, that this, we have an existential crisis in front of us. And I hate to put this on you, but I've put it on myself as well, but the idea of extreme ownership, right? This is, for all the people that will come after us, the work that we do now is super, super important to make things not as bad. It's no longer, can we just fix it? It's not as bad, right? So you should be able to just have fun in high school. And I do want you to do that in middle school. Some of you are in middle school, but this is really important. And how do you stay in the game, make it fun, but still, take it really seriously. So, that, I guess that's the point that I come from. It's how you view it. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. Next up, we'll hear from Lynn.
Yeah, how feasible do I think creating environmental changes this year? I think 100% feasible. I mean, I think we're doing it and we will continue to do it. And part of that is because we have, young advocates in the county and in the system that are pushing us and won't let us forget the commitments that we're making, and that making those commitments has to come with action. And I think we really are very fortunate to live in Montgomery County, Maryland, where is a very progressive county when it comes to issues of climate change and dealing with sustainability in a comprehensive way. And the state energy around those issues has waxed and waned with various administrations, but we're soon going to have a new one that is much more focused on climate and sustainability than the previous one. So that's just, you know, opportunity written all over it. And, you know, Adriana was talking about the fact that, you know, we do have a general election coming up in less than a month. And that, you know, we've also expanded our county council from 9 to 11 seats. And it looks like for the very first time in history, we are going to have a majority female county council. We're going from one woman out of 9 to what looks like 6 out of 11. And all of those folks bring their issues forward with them, but everyone that I know, and I think I know most of them, I think I know all of them, are very committed to sustainability and working on climate issues. And those are opportunities, you know, for students to work alongside legislators and electeds in a variety of internships. And you know, doing an internship where you talk to any students who were in the compostology team, and they'll tell you how closely they worked with several members of our state delegation on climate change and sustainability legislation last year during the General Assembly session. Lots of opportunity because of the environment that we live in. There's amazing opportunities for students to be part of work that's happening, not sit around and talk about it, but just to get out there and do stuff. And I think that is an amazing, like, again, I said, an amazing opportunity, lots of opportunities for students.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Your passion like really shows in your speeches. But lastly, we have Seth Adams.
Sure, and I agree. It is feasible. You know, I am of the mindset. You know, you get what you get what you out of what you put in, though. So for us, you know, I'm committed. The team is committed to putting in the energy and the time and the efforts to make environmental change. You know, I think there are still those around all of us, and you know, I know my colleague at the county, Adriana, can attest to, right? There's still, you know, a lot of ways, you know, climate action, you know, sustainability initiatives are not necessarily the forefront of you know, different policies or funding decisions. And so for us, it will happen. And whether or not, you know, there's support behind us or not, which I know for a fact Lynn is supporting me, so that's a really good place to be. But you know, regardless, we are going to make change. It's just I do think the amount of change or the progress that we hope to make, that is where some of those policy decisions will come in. That's where some of the, you know, the political elements, you know, sort of the deep change that's needed will be rooted in whether or not you know, those policymakers are standing beside us or we're helping pull them along. So I know that's a long way of saying it, but I do think, you know, change will happen this year. As Lynn said, you can all be a part of that change. We have projects every year, and I know there's projects at several of the schools that I saw from students that you can be part of. You can be involved and you can be a part of that change. You can see it. And so, you know, I think, again, you get out what you put in, and I think with all of you being here on a Sunday afternoon, you're ready to go. And so are we. So looking forward to it.
Thank you for all of those responses. Very insightful and also honestly inspiring. So next, what does environmental justice mean to you, Adriana?
For me, I would define it as having 2 parts to it. One is the process, and the second one being the outcome. With regards to process, it means that everyone has an opportunity to be at the table, have their voices heard, and that decisions are made with and by the community, and that no group is disadvantaged by the decision-making process. And then when it comes to outcomes, is that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, to live their lives to the fullest potential, and that a person's life outcome is not determined by the zip code where they live. I'll share one anecdote about the process because I think that over the years, Montgomery County, including our climate team, has come up short when it comes to kind of equitable community engagement. You know, when we were developing the climate action plan, we did put out the word to, you know, the county at large, come volunteer. We want to hear from you, participate in these climate planning work groups. And yes, we heard from a lot of members of the community, But when you sat around the room and you looked around, the members participating in those working groups did not necessarily reflect the diversity of our county. You know, we have a very diverse county, one of the most diverse in the nation, but those rooms tended to be predominantly white and predominantly older retired folks. And so we realized that we were missing some critical voices. We were not hearing from them. And so we took some amends to with some projects, including the resilience ambassadors that went out. We connected with 5 young people of our community who live in predominantly zip codes that were the most undercounted in the previous census, because we wanted to primarily hear from those that we don't normally hear from. And they activated their networks, and they facilitated conversations with their neighbors, with their friends, with their family members about quality of life and climate issues. And that really helped to inform the climate action plan even more. And now this year, as part of the historical amount of funding that we've received for climate initiatives in the county, we received some funding to kickstart what we're calling the Community Justice Academy. We're co-building, co-designing that program with the community. And the idea is that we would bring on board and compensate members of the community, primarily frontline members of the community, for them to identify side by side with the county, what are some key quality of life issues affecting their neighborhoods and what are their solutions? And then we have funding available to help seeds, provide some seed funding to help start implementing those projects. So we're excited about kind of this new community engagement approach. We think it's overdue, and just excited to see how it rolls out once it's up and running.
Great, thank you. And then Paul?
I think Adriana captured it nicely with the process and the outcome. The one thing I would add is that we've profoundly impacted communities by the things that we've done, by where we've located things like factories or put highways right through the middle of communities and all that. And there's probably less of that in Montgomery County than there is in PG County or in DC. So as students, you might think, well, if I just work in my county, I'm okay. I would suggest that maybe to think broader about that, because there aren't enough people looking at those really disadvantaged communities from previous environmental impacts and all that.
Thank you. And yeah, I definitely agree that we need to have more broader outlook on these issues. And then Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, just building off what Paul said, I mean, I think to me, environmental justice has to start. I mean, I'm 60 years old, and it has to start with a huge apology to, the generations coming after mine for all of the things that we failed to do and the ways that we allowed, decades of national and local government to get away with not doing anything meaningful, to acknowledge the reality of climate change and the comprehensive impact it was going to have on everything around us, globally to locally. And then, on those same lines, to me, environmental justice means we need to get more people in decision-making roles who are going to live with the decisions they make longer. Because this is what I think, and I'm saying this to you as a 60-year-old person. I almost am at a point where I don't think anybody over the age of 45 should hold any elected office, because the decisions you're making, you're not going to live with the impacts. And so, the more and the more quickly people who are significantly in those older age groups are and in decision-making roles are replaced by younger individuals who know that the decisions they're making right now, you're going to have to live with that for 60, 70 years, the better. And I think, environmental justice also means, we hear not a little bit in our community, not as much as some, with, the fallout from the Trump years, which normalized really hate speech and bigotry in all of its forms and making it okay. And people talking about CRT, Well, really, what it just means is we need to take that old graduate level theory that means when you're looking at policy change and you need, both past and future, you need to evaluate that through the lens of its impacts and its consequences, intended and unintended, in lots of different ways. And so as we do that, as we look at the unintended impacts, and the racist impacts of policies, we need to do the same thing with all of our decisions, looking at what are the outcomes going to be, intended or unintended, on the environment and on the work that we need to do to create truly sustainable practices, infrastructure, policies. And so that, to me, that's where it is. You've got to look at everything that you do through that lens.
Great, thank you, Lynn. That was very great. And then Seth?
Yeah, there's not much more to add. I would say, that ultimate outcome of environmental justice is building sustainable communities, in my perspective. And so what that means for me, in my role, I think maybe is slightly a little different, but I don't know if many of you know, but I'm also involved in doing boundary changes and working through different elements of service areas for schools. I'm not the one that sets programs in schools, but I am involved in the demographic, the geography aspects of how our schools are populated. And so tying in environmental justice to understanding truly in Montgomery County that there are zoning challenges, there are different housing differences, there's inequalities across the county from a perspective of what one community gets or has access to versus others. I think it's a real problem, and I think for us, really, being much more involved in the county planning actions, the county zoning and different policy elements that they put forward. I don't know if many of you know, but every year, the planning office in Montgomery County comes through and they do different master plans. There's discussions right now of what Montgomery County would look like 2050. I know Adriana is probably involved in that. If you read some of the newspapers, you'll read a little bit about it. That's critically important when you think about environmental justice. It's really important when you think about it from a perspective of how we're thinking about Montgomery County as a whole, but also then how does that translate to some of the smaller micro neighborhood decisions that are being made? We hear it every day about does school X have the same opportunities as school Y? And unfortunately, a lot of that is based on the way this county was formed and some of those larger planning elements that have been in place. And for me, environmental justice is incredibly important to understanding it, and then also putting in options and methodologies to make it better and fix it.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing your points and personal definitions of environmental justice. That was very insightful. So our next question is, how do you think big companies and organizations contribute to environmental harm? And we're going to start with Adriana.
So, when thinking through this question, my reflection is that, modern consumer society, modern capitalist society, which we're all a part of, in general contributes to, lots of different types of environmental harm. So that includes, materials extraction, waste generation, emissions generation, not just greenhouse gas emissions, but all sorts of air pollutants. And so the challenge for us is, how to quickly change from this historical and current practice into a practice that is more sustainable, that doesn't emit greenhouse gas and other pollutants, and that is also more protective of nature. So that is an urgent challenge. And how do we, figure out these solutions in a very, and implement them very quickly? Normally, technology advancement, takes time, but we don't have a lot of time here. And so I think that is a one of the kind of biggest challenges facing humanity right now. But the flip side of that is opportunity. There's lots of innovation going on across all sorts of industries. And so, I think that there is an opportunity to get involved, whether you decide to focus your career in the public or in the private sector, to really use whatever career you're part of, to really make an impact on reducing emissions, becoming more sustainable.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree. Next, we are going to move on to Paul, please.
I unmuted on time. Great. I'm getting better. Old dogs, new tricks, right? Let's see. So the first thing I thought of about big companies and organizations, absolutely, they do. We all know that. But how do we fix it? And I have two thoughts for you. One is kind of cover the externalities. In other words, cradle to grave. If you make it, you're responsible for its safe disposal in some way. And the other thing that I think would be even more impactful is if you've ever heard of benefit corporations. And so the idea is when you incorporate your business, part of what your goal is to provide some environmental or social benefit. And normally that's not the case. It's just about, hey, we need to provide return on investment to shareholders, and that allows us to justify all sorts of really bad things. But if say for instance, Montgomery County and all the schools in Maryland came up with a policy that benefit corporations, any business that was labeled that and registered that way, would have 10% get a bonus when they're competing for projects, then I think you'd see the system switch very quickly, and then people would have to not only satisfy shareholders' return on investment, but whatever social things were in there as well. There's some really cool companies that are benefit corporations. There's even one environmental consulting firm in Maryland that I'm aware of that's a benefit corporation. So I think it's a really cool but underexplored concept to fix this.
Great, yeah, thank you. And then next we have Lynn.
Yeah, I mean, so many ways to answer this question, and I'll just try to be really brief. I mean, I think bottom line, big companies and organizations contribute to environmental harm by putting profits before people, and the short gain, the quick gotcha over what's really best to create a future that we all want to be part of. And I think it gets to, and I think too many companies focus on, they want to convince people, and that, the business model is wide and deep, right? That we have to buy their things in order to live a decent life. And then we don't have time on our own to, cook a fresh, healthy meal. We have to go buy something that's prepackaged and all, has, had lots of impacts on the environment just in its manufacturing process. And really what we need to all be doing is living lighter. And so, if you find a company out there that can make money out of convincing people to live lighter, they do it, right? Because it's all about the profit line. Anyway, that's what I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynn. Now Seth.
It's hard to follow this group. They really cover pretty much everything. But I agree with Paul, and I'll just give you an example. And I may strike a nerve with Paul. I'm not sure on this one, but so I spent an incredible amount of time on the bay, with my kids. I'm under that age group where Lynn said that I could be involved or not be involved, just barely, but I'm there. So I have two kids in it, one in elementary and one starting middle school. So we spend a lot of time on the water, and we have seen really the fishery change dramatically in the bay, and not for the good, for sure. And so you see a lot of different elements. You see how are some of the big companies impacting it? Are they impacting it? And what it sort of always seems to boil down to is exactly what Paul was talking about on return on investments, and the lobbyists being able to sort of create the narrative for what's happening. And so for me, it's twofold, right? There's definitely reform that needs to happen in terms of how decisions are made, and how Lobbying happens within different policy making. Are there ways to circumvent it through opportunities like what Paul talked about? Absolutely. But at the same time, I guess those that are contributing lots of money to different campaigns, maybe those folks shouldn't be making decisions on some of those elements as well, right? I mean, is it a conflict of interest? Who knows? But beyond that too, though, I've also seen, particularly as we've gone through the pandemic, that there is we are absolutely in a culture where the immediacy of a need or want. You can go online and order something from Amazon and have it later that day. I mean, there's an expectation that things are instant now. We've started this school year, and we've had a lot of different parents want this fixed instantly. We want this product installed in all of our schools instantly, and it doesn't work that way. But I do think it also, that sort of that instant demand, that sort of that mentality that things are just should be always at your fingertips, to create processes and practices that lead to waste. Exactly what Lynn was talking about. And so I think these big companies are looking at that as a society element, and they're capitalizing on it, and it's not always to the benefit of the environment. So I think there's a lot of things, from both personal choices, behavioral changes, as well as big policy changes that can obviously be made. Some easier than others, but the answer to this one is yes.
Seth, can I add to your Chesapeake Bay thing? So I worked in government for a long time, and my view of Chesapeake Bay is very certainly that it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And if you're in government and you're getting paid to restore the bay, you're going to tend to put lipstick on a pig a lot. And so as you young folks go through your careers and trying to get things done, know that government will look incompetent if it's very clear something's not working. So they're going to present a very rosy picture sometimes, much more rosy than it really is. So anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for sharing. Those are all very perceptive points, but the next question is, what are some of the most notable effects of global warming that many people don't know about?
So when we were developing the climate action plan, one of the assessments that we conducted with the help of some outside experts was to look at some future projections of what we can expect the climate hazards in Montgomery County to look like, several decades from now. And the results, or part of the results, showed that we are more likely to continue to experience more extreme rain events, more, those storms where you get, more than 1 inch of rain falling an hour. And we're also more likely in the coming decades to experience more extreme bouts of drought. And so that may be a little bit puzzling for some people. How can, on the one hand, we are going to be, experiencing more rain, and on the other hand, we're going to be experiencing more drought. How do these two extremes, fit together? And so that's, maybe one of the aspects of climate change that some people may not realize, is that the seasonal swings between extreme drought and extreme rain become more likely with climate change. And that's because our global climate system is thrown into a more chaotic state.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Paul?
Lots of examples. I'll just choose one. I think desertification deserves more public notice. The Aral Sea, if you're familiar with that, was the 4th largest lake in the world. And now it's a dust bowl. It's a contaminated dust bowl because of industry upstream. And partly that was created by Russia diverting water, but climate change is fully implicated as well. If you look at other places in the world, like the civil war in Syria, geez, what's happening? There's no more water. People are not happy when there's no water. Look at Central America, people coming from Honduras. There's a dry area in Central America. And if you can't make a living there, you're not going to leave lightly. You're going to come here if you can. So a lot of those things are climate related, and we're kind of creating our own mess. Things like terrorism in Syria and Kazakhstan and so forth are linked to poverty, which is linked to climate change.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was interesting how you connected to the Aral Sea and water diversion. Sorry, next, Lynn.
Yeah, as Paul said, so many different things that people aren't thinking about as directly related to climate change. But I would just build off one of the things that he mentioned briefly, and that is one of the things that impacts us directly here in Montgomery County. One of the issues that I care a lot about, and that I've been trying to really kind of push the system on internally, is how we serve our newcomer students and their families, how we do that work better, how we can become a national model for serving those communities well, sort of like the folks in Oakland Unified out in California. And one of the initial hurdles that those of us who were really kind of pushing this work ran into inside the school system was a perception that the new influx of newcomer students and families that we experienced last year, when the border restrictions from the Trump administration were relaxed, was a one-time thing, and that the impacts and the effects and the numbers were gonna drop back down. And that I don't think is true. I think that as many people as flee conflict, more now are fleeing the effects of climate change. And that we are going to continue to see high numbers of people coming to the United States because the change in climate has made their prior way of life and their prior place of living uninhabitable and untenable. And so it's an issue that's going to continue to impact us. And I think we're moving the needle a bit on that and getting people to focus more on the fact that we are a top 10 destination for newcomers, and newcomers are going to continue to arrive. Even if you had zero conflict in the areas of the world in which so many of our families come from, we're still going to be seeing lots of people coming because of the impacts of climate change and the lack of planning to create more resilience in those communities.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, Seth.
And I'll just give a little different spin on it, and this is very local level. So, as I mentioned, I've been designing school buildings for almost 2 decades now, and one thing that has changed pretty dramatically over the past several years has been when we design for a building, we design for a 100-year event. And a 100-year rain event is something that's, again, is only supposed to come through once every 100 years. We have had more 100-year rain events in the past couple of years than is even imaginable. What does that mean? It means massive erosion. It means impacts to forest. It means for all those that you also don't know, there's quite a few wastewater treatment plants that overflow and discharge in those events. So just in our own backyard, we're seeing impacts. We're not always talking about it. You don't hear it make the news very often, but we have the data on how many of these large rain events have come through in the past several years and the havoc that they have wreaked all around us, particularly just from a Montgomery County Public Schools perspective. So it's happening all around us, and we heard from our other speakers about the global impacts, but it's happening in our own backyards as well. And it's I would ask you all just to do a little bit of homework on what some of these large rain events have, the impacts they have caused to water quality, to the tree canopy, to other sort of bystanders of those sort of tragic events. But yeah, it's here and it's happening for sure.
Okay, that's great. And first of all, thank you so much to all of our panelists for these insightful answers. And speaking for myself, I know that I've learned a lot here today. Just to round it off though, could all of you tell us what you'd like students to take away from what you've said today? Just a quick, brief answer. Adriana?
I hope that you feel empowered to to take action, to keep learning. This is a, understandably a very complex issue, but people created it. It's up to people to solve it. And so I hope that, whatever your future career interests lie, there's definitely a role for climate action in your life. So I hope that you feel empowered and have some ideas and resources coming out of this panel to move forward even faster.
Great. And Paul?
A few things. I mentioned earlier, education doesn't mean behavior change. That's something to keep in your back of your mind. I think seeking the root of the problem is really important because we get diverted very easily into things that are not going to fix things. The National Aquarium in Baltimore has done a cleanup 4 times a year. I think it's down to 2 times a year forever, 40 years or something. And one tide cycle comes in and the trash is back. So I would say that just makes you feel good. It doesn't change the system. And then the other thing, maybe the most important thing for you all, because you have the most to lose, is don't play to lose. If the system is playing to lose, don't let it.
Great. That's a strong comment to end off with. And then Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of 2 quick things. One, I'll just quote Indira Gandhi, the late Prime Minister of India. There are 2 kinds of people who get stuff done and the people who take credit. And I advise you to be part of the first group because there's a lot less competition. But also, even hyperlocal. So, we talked about events, and impacts global to hyperlocal. We've made some promises in this expansive new MCPS sustainability policy. And one of them is to create opportunities to meaningfully expose students to and prepare them for 21st century green jobs. So, work with us to make that truly real and hold us accountable to that promise.
Perfect. And then Seth?
So for me, I know, when you think about global climate, the global climate emergency, it's just sometimes it feels like there's so much that can be done, and you almost get lost in really trying to focus and figure out what you can do, just because it's so massive. But I hope you've learned that there's things even in our own backyard that we can do, we can be a part of. Everything from some of the policy supporting Adriana in the county climate action plan to supporting us as a school system as we embark in trying to meet some really lofty goals, and even the influence that you have on your neighbors. That is incredibly powerful. So I hope that's just one of the things that you've learned from today. There's some really smart people, Paul, Adriana, Lynn, on this call. The incredible amount of knowledge and dedicated their work to this. If you can support them, if you can support me, we're all in. We are ready and willing. So looking forward to seeing more of you at some of our events and participating in some of the work.
Great, thank you. And for sure, I ask everybody here to continue being inspired to advocate for environmental change and make a difference. Now we're going to be moving on to breakout rooms. And this will be up until 4:55 or 4:50.
Okay, so here are some of the guidelines for our breakout rooms today. So you are expected to remain respectful of the panelists and everyone else here today. So feel free to unmute and ask a question, or you can even hop between breakout rooms until 4:55 p.m.
Okay, so very shortly we'll be entering the breakout room portion of the panel. We expect that, so each breakout room will hold a panelist who will be open to more specific questions. And we want you to note that in the slides, there are many potential questions you can ask the panelists found in slides 17 through 22.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to assign all of the panelists to their designated breakout room, and then all the participants can just go to whichever breakout room they would like to go to.
And please note that Sarah isn't here, so it will be between Adriana, Lynn, Seth, and Paul that you choose the breakout room and go to.
Okay, so you can feel free to go.
Madison, oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I opened all the rooms.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
And is everyone out of breakout rooms right now? Madison?
Yes, I think so. They're closed, so should be good.
We're just going to quickly ask you guys to fill out this feedback form and raffle form here. We are raffling a solar powered phone charger for anyone who's interested, so definitely mark that on the feedback form if you would like to be entered. And we're also going to have a quick word from our co-president of MoCo, Peter. Go ahead, Peter. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Peter. I am a freshman at Northwest High School. I'm one of the co-founders of MoCo, along with Lumina. I don't know if she's here right now, but yes. And I just want to thank everyone for coming today and attending this very, very exciting and exciting panel. I know our environmental education department worked really hard on this panel. And I especially want to thank our panelists for coming, especially on a Sunday. Your responses to each of the questions were very wise and inspirational. And we really thank you for your attendance. MoCo is a new organization. We started this summer. So we're very new, we're very fresh. And we're hoping to get a lot done this year and in years to come. Adriana, thank you so much. I don't know if you're still, oh yes, you are. Sorry, I can't see everyone, but Adriana, thank you so much for coming. MoCo is actually currently working with the county council, with actually the Chesapeake Climate Action Network to campaign for Bill 1322. Which is that electrification bill. Paul, thank you so much for coming as well. We wish you all the best at Johns Hopkins and all of your sustainability work. Seth and Lynn, thank you so much for coming and representing MCPS. On behalf of MoCo, we're hoping that sometime soon we can have some sort of student-led sustainability commission in collaboration with the Department of Facilities Management. Just an idea out there. I know it's kind of been in the works with MCPS, but hasn't really been initiated yet. But overall, thank you to everyone who came. And in my opinion, this panel, as MoCo's first panel, was a great success. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and we will be sending out all of the slideshow, the recording for the panel, and everything else in an upcoming email. And then,
All right, so this is just a final list of reminders that we've compiled. We just like to remind you to join us for future events, and that we are going to be hosting more events like this in the future, like with town halls and panels. And if you're interested in environmental advocacy, you should be sure to join the MoCo Discord. I think we'll drop a link in the chat. And make sure that you have filled out both the panel feedback, raffle, and attendance form.
great. And then once again, thank you for attending, for being one of our panelists, and for everybody part of MoCo that's here today. And if you have any remaining questions or concerns, here are a few ways of contacting us. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.